Hey, hello everyone, I'm Applard. I guess I'm the KVM guy now, because I like reviewing KVM solutions. So today I'm taking a look at the Cytrence Kiwi+. This is a new version of a product I reviewed maybe 6 months ago or so, the Cytrence Kiwi, and it's got a pretty simple goal. You plug it into your computer over standard USB-C, we call that the host, then you plug it into another computer over USB, any USB, it's just USB 2, and HDMI. We call that the victim. And from our host computer, we can completely control the victim as if we had a real keyboard, the K, monitor, the V, video, and M, mouse, KVM. So using a little guy like this, we can get rid of like what IT people would call a crash cart. So if I work with servers or headless computers like this all day, I don't want to carry around a monitor and a keyboard and mouse. That's why they make rolling carts, so we don't have to carry them. But rolling the cart around is also a huge pain when I got a laptop with me. So why can't I just have a little box like this? It makes the victim computer that I'm trying to manage as an administrator show up just as a normal window on my laptop. Then I can interact with it, type stuff into it, use the mouse, etc. Just as if it's another program on my computer. So if you work with a lot of PCs, servers, test a lot of systems, having this ability is really, really handy. So if you'd like to see the new Cytrence Kiwi+ models, then come along on this adventure. Also, some disclosures quick. First off, I am now selling merch, so you may buy this beautiful Home Lab, your own personal data center t-shirt. Second off, 3 of these guys were sent to me by Cytrence for this review. They have 3 different variations of their products. They sent me 1 of each variant in retail packaging. No money changed hands, and they will not see the review until you do. So, on with the video. So, let's take a look at what they sent me in the box. So, in contrast to the original Kiwi that came in a fairly simple box, this time I got 3 of them because they each have a different feature set, I believe. So let's see what we got. So we got a +Net, we got a +USB, and +Drive. So different feature sets. I'll have to take a look at what each one offers. So cables, we've got a USB-C to C. This is very short, so probably 6 inches, 10 gigabits cable. We've also got this guy, which is a Type C to Type A. I believe this is for the victim, no HDMI. And the unit itself, yeah, it's metal. So this guy is metal, I can tell because it's cold. It's been down here in my basement. So on one side, we've got HDMI and Type C. They're not labeled, so I'm not sure which is which, but I'm guessing that's the input because HDMI is the input. And on the other side, I've got a Type C and some sort of reset button. At the bottom, I've got this thing that comes out. So I've got a 3-pin header. Next up, I got the +USB. So again, on the host side, I've got a Type C host interface. I think that's a fingerprint. On the other side, I've got the Type C victim and the HDMI victim. And on this side now, I've got the additional USB 2. I think this is USB 2, it's not blue. And we still have the 3-pin header. So last one, this is the +Drive. Again, we have the USB Type C host, the Type C and HDMI victim, and the 3-pin header on the top. So from the outside, the +Net and the +Drive both look identical, other than their label obviously. And the +USB gains this additional USB port. Okay, so now I got my victim here, and we're going to try to use the victim using one of the 3 Kiwis. So just doing basic stuff, using the mouse, copying, pasting text, that kind of thing. After this, I'm going to go on and reinstall the operating system, or at least boot an operating system, but first let's just get the basics down. So I got one of the Kiwis, all 3 of these should do the same thing, and we're going to test it out. So first I got to plug the Kiwi into the computer. So just a Type C cable into the host side and into my laptop. Now next up I need HDMI. Now they didn't provide an HDMI cable, which I think would have been nice. The argument, I guess, is of course that people want cables of different lengths, which makes sense, but a short HDMI to match the short USB would be what I would carry around. So let's hook this guy up. HDMI to the victim, into the Kiwi, and then USB Type A into the Kiwi, and ready to go. So over here in the app, we can hit connect to Kiwi, and I should probably turn the power on the victim. Let's see what we got. There we go. Okay, we are up. I can right click, I can open a terminal, I can say thing. Now, if you followed my channel for a while, you know that I've reviewed plenty of KVMs, both the IP type and the USB type. So it does not come to a shock to me that this works. Every KVM should be able to do this, and so far only one I've tested can't. So let's do some copy and paste. That's where sort of the UI of some of these comes to show. It's one of the features you're probably going to use kind of a lot. So I got a new text document here in Mousepad, and we're going to paste into it. So we say paste text to target, and there we go, okay. So we hit some sort of limit, so I pasted the entire text of the B movie, and I got the first 83 lines. I wonder if that comes out to like some even number of characters or something. I don't see any text errors just looking at it. So I recall from the first gen Kiwi that they limited you to like 1024 characters, and that probably makes sense because on some of these KVMs I've pasted in the script of the B movie and then I've waited 10 minutes for it to type out the whole thing. So having a limit makes sense. I wonder if I can configure that. So in the settings I found that macros have a 1K limit too, so it seems like that's just the limit of text pasting, which is fine. Another thing I'm curious about is how well this handles resolution changes. So some of the KVMs I've used struggle when the victim changes its resolution. Often this can happen in the BIOS, but I can just as easily change it here. So it shows up as a Cytec Info 32-inch. What do we change that to, like some weird ass resolution like 1280 by 1024? Yeah, there we go. How about something even lower, 800 by 600? Wow, that looks awful. I mean, it works, it just looks awful. How did we ever live with displays at 640 by 480? I know, I question that every time I set my display to 640 by 480. And back to 1080p. Nice. So next up, I want to boot this guy into a Linux ISO. So simulate what it'd be like to install the operating system. I'm not actually going to re-image my Kali system, I just want to get to the installer. So this is where the three different models actually do come into play. So each of them has like a different way of helping with this. So with the USB version, it's got a USB port on the bottom. So I could take my Ubuntu flash drive, magically make the USB port appear, and stick it in there. So now I can choose to hook this USB up either to the victim or to the host. So that's one option. If you carry around flash drives all the time, you could do it this way. Now the other way to do it is using the drive option, which is the one I have here. And that's essentially the same as this, except there's a built-in 32 gig drive instead of a USB port. So that's my favorite option. So that's the one I'm going to demonstrate here. So first I'm going to go to my menu here and I'm going to say I want my shared storage to go to the host. Next up I'm using Raspberry Pi Imager. So now I need to take my Ubuntu ISO that I'm trying to boot and image it onto the drive in the Kiwi here. So I'm using a tool called Raspberry Pi Imager for this. Some people trust Ventoy. I really don't boot anything other than Ubuntu and Proxmox. So usually I just carry two flash drives with Ubuntu and Proxmox. But realistically, if I was doing this, I'd probably just have a Debian ISO and go from there on everything. It's not that difficult. So Raspberry Pi Imager, imaging the 32 gig drive built into this thing. So it shows up just as a generic drive. And let's go. So with that done, I go here and I say shared storage to target. Yes. And now I'll reboot. So now I got to mash the escape key to get into the BIOS so I can select my new boot drive. And we are in the BIOS. No problems here. And we're going to boot from generic mass storage. There we go. And here we are in Ubuntu. So that worked exactly as expected and was pretty fast too. So next I'm going to benchmark this internal drive. So, I mean, usually if you bring your own flash drive, you're obviously at whatever speed your flash drive is. Flash drives are not usually that fast. Some of the KVMs I've tested, especially the IP ones with integrated storage, have wildly different performance metrics. So I don't know what kind of throughput we're expecting from this thing. It's probably hard to see, but random reads, I got 35 megabytes a second, and random writes, I got 9.9 megs a second. That's with a 1 meg block size. So if you're writing the disk, you tend to write the whole thing at once. So 10 megabytes per second-ish writes. So not the highest quality flash, but not terrible. Read rate, I was getting about 30 to 40 megabytes per second. Again, 1 meg random reads. which not awful. So definitely on par with many flash drives. So for the next trick, I got to swap out the Kiwi for Kiwi. This one is the net version, so we can see what the net version can do. So then over here in the app, I just come over to menu and I find network link. So we're going to enable that, confirm change. So now EN22 has showed up on macOS. And of course I got a link local. So I'm going to copy this guy. Over here on the victim, if I IPA, I can see ETH1 has showed up, and again I got a link local. So we can iPerf now. I'll zoom in a bit for you guys so you can see better. So we can just iPerf, and it looks like we're doing about 100 meg or so. Seems pretty reasonable to me. So this shows up as high-speed USB device and A6 AX88772E. So that guy is USB 2 10100 fast Ethernet controller with a built-in PHY, I think it says here. So it must be connecting these guys back to back. Yeah, so built-in PHY. Okay, so without taking these guys apart yet, the design hypothesis is they have a USB 2 from the host side and the victim side. They either connect that to a USB switch, which we can control, and then that gets us the USB, or we have that same USB switch, but we have the storage chip from a USB flash drive that gives us the +Drive. Third option we have is to connect two Ethernet controllers back to back. So instead of using like a single chip solution for this, which doesn't really exist because I've looked for them before, basically have a USB 2 100 meg Ethernet controller and then just connect the 100 meg lines straight into each other. Works fine. So that's what we have for the +Drive, the +Net, plus USB. The original Kiwi, which I have here by the way too, doesn't have any of these options, so it just has basic KVM functionality. So at this point I think it's just time to tear it down left. So this outer enclosure feels metal. These two ends here are plastic, so I'm going to try to pry one of them out and see if we can pop this guy apart. Of course I've got my favorite iFixit toolkit. Not going to need any of those, I think. I think the tool that I actually want to use is the spudger. So the one I'm taking apart is the +Drive. So I'm expecting them to all be similar on the inside. But get in there. Oh, looks like I cracked the plastic. Oops. Let's try that again. So this guy is injection molded. I don't know if you can see from the place where it's cracked, but it's injection molded, which totally makes sense for a part like this. I'm just not sure how to remove it. Okay, so I had a new plan. My plan was to drill through with a screw to extract it, and it seems to have cracked. And I hope I didn't damage the circuit board, because I actually do want to use this for... Oh, well, there it goes. Yeah, looks like I did bite into the circuit board a little bit. Wow, this thing is really held in aggressively. Ooh, I wonder if it's molded in place. I don't know. Well, let's change out to a flathead bit and start picking some of it out. So, do this bit. Please come out of there. Please, 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 please come out. Jesus. So I did dig into the circuit board a little bit. Hopefully it still works. I guess we'll find out. Can I press it out the other side yet? No. Definitely bent the HDMI connector doing this. Sorry. There's clearly plastic going through this piece, so I'm not sure how this molding process is working, but it's certainly filled in here. It's not fully potted, but it's not far off. Well, it looks like I'm not getting this out, so it's certainly pretty well built though. So it looks like the board is then injection molded around to come up with something that surrounds it most of the way. That is then inserted into the metal extrusion case, and the ends are sort of squished to bulge out the plastic here that's molded it and make a good seal. So this is certainly a well-built product. It's not going to fall apart on you, at least mechanically, and there's probably no way to repair it, but again, there probably wouldn't be for something in this price point anyway. So I have had one problem with one feature, the virtual stereo port. Now this is a feature that also was on the Kiwi Pro, and back when I reviewed this guy, I didn't test that feature because I didn't have any single board computers to test with in Finland. So in theory, the Kiwi Plus has all of the features of the Kiwi Pro except for the GPIO port. So this guy has 4 GPIOs and a 6-pin header. The new Kiwis just have 2. So that's TX and RX if you want to hook it up as a serial port to like a Raspberry Pi or something. You can also use those 2 as ATX control, I believe. There's some warnings on the website about that. But it should also be able to emulate a serial just straight through the USB connection. So on the victim side, it creates a virtual serial port. And in theory, on the host side, it creates one as well. And then we can just serial between these things. However, using the host on macOS, I have not been able to get this to work. I have been able to get it to work just fine with the Linux host, and the issue seems to be dealing with how macOS deals with pseudo terminals. Let me show you what I got going on here. So over here on the Kiwi, on Linux, I've got this virtual serial port connection. I can choose disabled target device or side UART. So if I choose target device here, I get port name devpts1. And that is not a TTY, that is a PTY. So TTY stands for teletype, and it's kind of like a typewriter, but the typewriter keyboard is disconnected from its own printer, and when you type in a key, it encodes that as ASCII. This is where ASCII came from, by the way. And it would send it over a phone line to the keyboard on the other side. So if you had 2 teletypes just hooked up to each other, when I type on my keyboard, it would print on your printer, and vice versa. So we could send messages to each other with this method. Now, when computers came along, using a teletype was the logical method of interfacing with the computer. So you would type commands in your teletype, those key presses would go into the computer, and it would send back out characters that would get printed on your printer in front of you. So as you type commands, it might echo them back out, and then whatever results you got would come up on your printer as a printout. So that's a TTY. Now in Linux, we have a lesser feature device called a PTY, or a pseudo terminal. So when you use a pseudo terminal, for example, it has less I/O control features than the full TTY, so it doesn't have baud rate or thing like that. So in some ways it kind of makes sense, I guess, but the macOS implication of this doesn't work the same way, and I could not get the PTY on macOS to be mountable. So now if I try to actually use this guy with a serial terminal, it does come up here, so I can use it with CU. And over on the Mac side, I can do the same thing. And it came up. So I can type here. And over on this side, text comes out there, so I could type. And types comes out here too, so it's functioning, I guess. So as you may have noticed though, I got 2 of these guys set up. So what's actually happening is my Mac is using a Kiwi to control the Linux PC. Then the Linux PC is running a Kiwi again with the Mac OS as a victim, but only for USB. I'm not capturing HDMI. So in that direction, the serial works, because on the victim side, it emulates a USB serial chip. So it shows up as a standard USB serial port with all the settings of a TTY. But on the host side, it only gets a PTY. So what happens if I try to do that same thing with Mac OS as the host and Linux as the victim? So over on Mac OS, I go to connection, say target device, apply, and I get dev TTY SO11. Now this again is a limited terminal, like what Linux would call a PTY. But over on the victim, I get a full-on serial, TTY ACM1. But if I again try to use this TTY SO11, I get permission denied. But ACM1 is just fine. But on macOS, I can't do the same thing because it's not a TTY, it's a pseudo terminal. So why this is important, because if you use a different serial terminal app, like say this one, pseudo terminals don't show up here. It's not a real serial port. So I'm not sure how this is on Windows. I don't like testing on Windows, as you know. But at least on macOS here, using the pseudo terminal, and also on Linux using the pseudo terminal, is much more of a pain than using a real TTY terminal. And I don't see a real reason for them to be using the pseudo terminal. So, I mean, the baud rate would have to match on both sides. They could just ignore the baud rate. That's what a lot of like USB serial emulators do. You can set the baud rate to whatever you want and bytes will still flow across. But yeah, so because they're using the pseudo terminal, it's really weird to access the terminal on macOS and quite difficult to make actual use of it, especially if you use a GUI serial app, which is common on macOS. Now, while we're talking about downsides of the application, you are stuck with using their client application. Now, generally, I think most of you that are buying something like this are going to be using it like a data center environment, places where you wouldn't be wanting to use a web app anyway. So installing a client app makes a lot of sense to me. However, the app is not open source, which in itself wouldn't necessarily be a problem. I mean, they're selling a product here. but it's not available for every flavor of Linux, and that's definitely a problem with distributing Linux apps. So they've only compiled it for deb packages, essentially. So they have a version for Debian 13, Ubuntu 22, and Ubuntu 24. But all three of those are available as deb packages, not as like an app image. So if you're a Fedora user, an Arch user, by the way, the NixOS users that seem to love invading my Discord, by the way, if you're one of those guys, you're going to be stuck without a Linux version of the app because they're only packaging it as a deb package. So if they're going to keep the app closed, they should definitely be packaging it in a more generic way, whether that's as an app image, which app image or Flatpak, I think, are the two preferred ways of packaging desktop apps on Linux in a distro-neutral environment. I don't think this has any dependencies on kernel modules. I don't think it should. They're using USB video and USB serial, but they shouldn't need to package that. So I don't know why they're packaging only deb. That's definitely a disadvantage for me. I'm using the macOS version though, and that's nice. So with that, I guess it's time to talk about what I think of the Kiwi+, how it compares to the original Kiwi, the Kiwi Pro, if the new models are worth it. So with the addition of these 3 new models to the lineup, they now have 5 options at 3 different price points. So let me just get my numbers straight real quick. Okay, the original Kiwi non-Pro is currently selling for $59. The Pro version adds the GPIO headers and the serial port, and also the ability to record in their software. That one is currently selling for $99. Again, all of these prices are current as of December 2025. Prices change over time. Now, all 3 of the new models, the +Net, the +Drive, and the +USB, are all selling for $99. It says that's a launch special, so I'm not sure how long that price will last. So given that, would I pay extra for a Plus over a Pro? Would I pay extra for a Pro over a base model? And would I get a USB, a Drive, or a Net? So for the stuff that I do, now I'm reviewing mini PCs on my channel primarily. I also use things like the box PC, stuff like that. I'm working down here in my lab, and I'm trying to keep my workbench clean. But I have plenty of flash drives around. I got my trusty Micro Center. I've got the Rubik's Cube, which is unfortunately only 2 gigs, so F in the chat for all the Linux ISOs that are now bigger than 2 gigs. But I don't mind plugging this guy into the system and using the original Kiwi that I have. I also have some other competitors to this. I use all of them regularly. The feature set of the $59 Kiwi I think is excellent for most people. Now going up from there, the $89 one gets you recording. They have a comparison on their website, by the way. Also, I think their website could improve a bit on the Kiwi+. I do know that they've only sort of soft launched these, and they're planning on announcing it more broadly in the next few weeks. But they have a comparison table of the original Kiwi and the Kiwi Pro, and it'd be nice to see the Plus versions added to that table, or more prominent at the website. I found it was a little bit tricky to figure out that all the Kiwi Plus is supposed to have all the features of the Kiwi Pro. So I wasn't sure if some features were supposed to be missing and what I was supposed to be testing. Now, if you're a single board computer kind of guy, you're doing like ARM stuff like Jeff Geerling, these ports might be nice for you. In my particular use case, working with servers and stuff like this, the GPIO is very useless to me. Now they do have an ATX board for this, where you can use this guy to do ATX power control, where you can turn the system on and off. However, me personally, I am plugging it in with a 6-inch USB cable to my laptop, and I'm using it on my laptop. I can reach over and press the power button, and it's easier for me to do that than to wire up the ATX control for the systems I'm working on. In general, I think if you want ATX control, you probably want an IP-based solution instead of a USB-based solution. I got a video up here where I review those types of products instead of the USB ones. Now that doesn't mean the USB one isn't a very valuable product. I use my USB KVMs way more often than I use my IP ones because I'm testing such a wide variety of hardware on my bench here. So if you're the kind of person that does computer repair, if you're in IT and you have to image systems all day, if you have like lines of computers where you have to do basic setup, stuff like that, something like this instead of a row of monitors and keyboards will be very handy for you. Also, if you're going into the data center, having something like this, pretty handy as well. The other target for this is people with single board computers. So if you have like a Raspberry Pi you're trying to get into, it's kind of a pain to set up a monitor just for the Raspberry Pi. So again, Kiwi can help with that. So I think that leads me on to the drive, the USB, and the net. So I totally understand why your USB for your flash drive is mutually exclusive with the drive. Unfortunately, my drive got kind of wrecked when I tried to tear it down, so sorry about that. It is very well built though. So I got the drive and I got the USB. And it makes sense that you have to choose between having a built-in drive or having your own drive. Now, having the net seems like it should be an add-on option for the other two, maybe for a bonus fee or whatever. Because I could see this being very useful as an all-in-one device. If I had a USB and a net, all of those things could be very useful to me. Or a USB and a drive. Just because I want the net doesn't mean I don't want the drive. So that's sort of a product segmentation thing. There could be technical reasons why they can't fit all in this enclosure. I don't know. I'd be willing to pay a little bit extra to have net and drive or net and USB, personally. I also like the net when I'm working with small devices. I have Ethernet on my bench, obviously. I've got two of them. I got PoE Ethernet, and I've also got 10 gig non-PoE that I can use for testing systems. But sometimes I don't want to give them access to my network. So using the +net means I've given them essentially a direct connection to my laptop and nothing else. So I can SSH in, I could do stuff like that. I could potentially bridge them onto the network if I want to, but that's up to my laptop to control, not the victim device. So it is useful. I think realistically most of you guys are going to want the base model, or if you don't want the base model, you're probably going to want the drive. And on the drive, you're going to put either Ventoy or the operating system you most commonly use, and you're going to be happy with it. So if you're a Windows shop, you put Windows on here, Windows Server, Windows 11, whatever, and never have to touch it again, never have to carry around a flash drive, and you'll be happy. Now as for downsides, I tried to test this as thoroughly as possible. I did have that issue with the pseudo terminal. Now also, I'm expecting a lot of you won't even care and won't even use that feature because I had no use for it until I started working with single board computers. And even then, you're probably going to be plugging into the physical UART if you're doing low-level enough work where you need a serial connection instead of HDMI. So it's probably not a feature you're going to use very often, but it is there. Next up, some cables. So they told me that they didn't include cables because they wanted you to pick cables that were the right length for you, I guess. And it does make sense because if you buy all short cables like this, sometimes you got to plug like the USB on the front and the HDMI on the back, and that can be kind of a pain. I personally, though, would like that they either included the cables or didn't, because they included some of them. So this cable they came with, 6 inches long, plug the Kiwi into my MacBook, perfect length. Now, most people are either going to want to plug the board right next to them, in which case this little USB would be perfect, and a correspondingly short HDMI would also be perfect, or they're going to be going like 3 or 4 feet to a computer on a rack, in which case they buy their own cables, it's fine. But I think they should either ship just this one cable for the host side, or ship all 3, but not just 2. Minor nitpick, I know. Some of their competitors also sell carrying cases. These guys don't, so maybe a custom carrying case would be nice. You can fit all the cables in. Or sell the cables as an extra bundle with the carrying case. I know one of the competitors, again, sells a nice little zipper bag where you can put the box and the carrying cable and the adapters and stuff like that. Especially if you need a VGA adapter. Those are a huge pain in the ass to deal with. So, I think that's pretty much it. Also, if you'd like to buy this beautiful shirt, Home Lab, your own personal data center, I sell merch now. Link in the description below for my Ko-fi, where you can buy merch like this. Trying to rep it a little bit more. I've made some sales already, so thanks guys for that. I have a Discord server, link down below for that as well. You can also give me tips on the Ko-fi, but I'd rather you buy my merch because then you get some out of the deal too. I'm also on Mastodon if you want to follow me there, and I guess I'll see you guys on the next adventure.